The rain in Chicago doesn't wash things clean, it just makes the grime slicker. Rachel Stone stood at the threshold of apartment 4B. The heavy canvas of her grocery bags digging red trenches into her palms. She paused, not because of the weight, but because of the silence. It was a habit she hadn't been able to shake since her discharge papers were signed 5 years ago. In the sandbox of Kandahar, silence usually meant the mortar shells were already in the air. Here, in a walk-up on the south side, it usually just meant the neighbors were out of liquor. She shifted her weight, the ache in her left knee, a parting gift from an IED outside of Kabul, flaring up in the damp weather. She keyed the lock. 1 turn, 2 turns. The deadbolt slid back with a heavy, reassuring thunk. "Logan, I'm home," she called out, her voice softening instantly. The transformation was physical. Her shoulders dropped 2 inches, the steel in her jaw melted. This was the only place she allowed herself to not be Sergeant Stone. "Mom." The thundering of small feet against cheap laminate flooring was the best sound in the world. Logan, 6 years old and missing a front tooth, rounded the corner and collided with her legs. He smelled like peanut butter and that peculiar, dusty scent of old carpets. "Easy, Tiger." Rachel laughed, dropping the bags to ruffle his hair. It was dark, messy hair, just like his father's. "Did you finish your homework? Or were you busy saving the galaxy again?" Logan grinned, looking up with eyes that held too much intelligence for a first grader. "Both." Mrs. Higgins fell asleep in the chair again. "So I played quiet." Rachel felt a pang of guilt sharp enough to pierce her Kevlar vest. Mrs. Higgins was 80, sweet, and cheap. It was the best childcare Rachel could afford on a double shift at the logistics warehouse. "You're a good man, Logan Stone," she whispered, kissing his forehead. She moved to the kitchen, unpacking the essentials: milk, eggs, a box of mac and cheese, and a small, reduced-price chocolate bar for Logan. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom box where the living room doubled as Logan's play area. But it was clean. It was theirs. "Hey, Mom?" Logan was sitting cross-legged on the rug, surrounded by a city of plastic blocks. In his hands, he held it. The toy. It was a vintage-style robot. Something out of a 1950s sci-fi comic. Bulky, made of die-cast metal painted a faded cherry red. With stiff, articulated limbs and a glass dome head. It looked heavy. It looked out of place among the modern plastic superheroes. "Dad sent it back," Logan said, not looking up. He was twisting the robot's left arm. Click, click, click. Rachel froze. A carton of milk hovering halfway to the fridge. The air in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "What do you mean? Dad sent it back?" "The mailman brought it. Mrs. Higgins signed for it. Dad fixed it. See?" Logan flipped a switch on the robot's back. The glass dome lit up with a swirling amber light. And a tinny, mechanical voice crackled. "System, online." Rachel walked over slowly, wiping her hands on her jeans. She hadn't seen Mark in 2 years. Mark, the brilliant coder. Mark, the charming gambler. Mark, who loved them enough to leave so his debts wouldn't become their death sentence. "Let me see that, baby." She took the robot. It was heavier than she remembered. Mark had bought this for Logan when he was born, an antique collector's item. Why send it now? She turned it over. Taped to the bottom of the robot's foot was a small sliver of blue painter's tape. On it, in Mark's frantic, jagged handwriting, were 3 words: "For his future." A chill crawled up Rachel's spine. triggering the hairs on her neck. It was that feeling again. The spidey sense. The "something is wrong" alarm that had kept her alive in the desert. She stood up and walked to the window. Peering through the blinds, the street below was a blur of neon signs reflecting on wet asphalt. A black sedan was parked across the street. Engine running. Lights off. "Logan," Rachel said, her voice dropping into what Logan called her soldier voice. "Turn off the TV." "Mom? Do it, now." She moved. The fatigue vanished, replaced by a surge of adrenaline that sharpened her vision to a pinprick. She grabbed her phone. 4 missed calls from a number she didn't recognize. Then, a text message from an unknown ID. Received 10 minutes ago. "He's dead, Rachel. They found him in the river. They're coming for the key. Run." The phone slipped in her hand. Mark. The grief hit her like a sledgehammer. But she shoved it into a mental box and slammed the lid shut. Grieve later. Survive now. "Logan, grab your shoes. No socks. Just shoes. Fast," she ordered, moving to the hall closet. "Is the bad guys coming?" Logan asked. He didn't cry. He was a veteran's son, he knew the drills. They had practiced this as a game since he was 4. "Yeah, baby. The bad guys are coming." Rachel reached into the top shelf of the closet. Inside a shoebox labeled "Winter Gear," and pulled out her Glock 19. She checked the magazine. Full. One in the chamber. Thump. A heavy sound from the hallway outside their door. Not a knock. A boot testing the frame. "Bathroom. Tub. Now," Rachel hissed, shoving the robot into Logan's backpack and throwing it over his small shoulders. She scooped him up and ran to the bathroom, dropping him into the porcelain tub. "Lay flat. Hands over ears. Open your mouth slightly so the noise doesn't hurt. Do not move until I say my code name." "Valkyrie," Logan whispered, his eyes wide, filled with tears he refused to shed. "That's my boy." Rachel killed the lights in the apartment. She moved into the shadows of the narrow hallway. The Glock held in a high compressed ready position. She controlled her breathing. In for 4. Hold for 4. Out for 4. The silence stretched, tight as a piano wire. Then, the world exploded. The front door didn't just open, it disintegrated. A battering ram hit the deadbolt with the force of a freight train. Splintering the wood, the door flew inward, crashing against the wall. 2 figures surged in, black tactical gear, night vision goggles, suppressed MP5 submachine guns. These weren't street thugs looking for a TV to pawn. These were pros. Tier 1 operators. Why? The question flashed in Rachel's mind. But her body was already answering. She didn't fire immediately. A muzzle flash would give away her position. She waited. The first man swept the living room, his weapon moving with fluid precision. The second man stepped into the hallway. Now, Rachel stepped out of the bedroom doorway. She didn't aim for the head, too small. Too much armor. She aimed for the pelvic girdle, the spot where body armor usually ends and mobility begins. Pop pop. 2 shots. Controlled, quiet, efficient cracks in the small space. The lead man crumpled, screaming as his hip shattered. The second man spun around. Faster than Rachel expected. He unleashed a burst of automatic fire. Bullets chewed through the drywall inches from Rachel's face, dusting her with white powder. She dove back into the bedroom, rolling across the floor, suppressing fire. The second man yelled, American accent, military jargon. "Secure the package. Forget the woman. A voice crackled from their radio. The package. They didn't want money. They wanted the robot. Rachel crawled to the edge of the bed. She had the angle. When the second man moved past the doorway toward the bathroom, toward Logan, Rachel surged up. She didn't shoot. She tackled. She hit him at the knees, driving her shoulder into his side. They crashed into the cheap drywall, smashing through into the living room. The man was strong, heavy, smelling of gun oil and mint gum. He swung his rifle barrel at her head. Rachel ducked, the metal grazing her temple, drawing blood. She jammed her pistol into his armpit, the gap in the vest, and pulled the trigger. The man went limp. Silence returned, heavier than before, ringing in her ears. The smell of cordite and blood filled the small apartment. Rachel scrambled up, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She swept the room. The first man was groaning on the floor, trying to reach for his radio. She kicked it away and leveled her gun at his face. "Who sent you?" she snarled. "The lioness protecting the cub." The man laughed. A wet, gurgling sound. "Doesn't matter. Stone, you can't run from the ledger. The whole world wants that key." The ledger. The rumors were true. The mythical criminal syndicate that operated on the dark web. Mark hadn't just stolen from a bank, he had stolen from the devil's accountant. Sirens wailed in the distance. Not police. Police took 10 minutes in this neighborhood. These were the cleanup crew. Or reinforcements. She ran to the bathroom. "Valkyrie." Logan popped up, shaking but unharmed. "Mom? We're leaving. Fire escape. Go." She grabbed her go bag from under the sink. Cash. Fake IDs. First aid. She slung it over her shoulder. Grabbed Logan's hand, and they sprinted through the ruined living room, stepping over the bodies of the men who had tried to end their lives. Rachel paused for 1 second at the broken door. She looked back at the apartment. The photos on the wall. Logan's height chart marked in pencil. The life she had tried so hard to build. It was gone. Dead. Just like Mark. She pushed open the window to the fire escape. The cold Chicago rain hit her face, mixing with the blood on her temple. "Where are we going?" Logan asked, his voice trembling as he clutched the heavy red robot to his chest. Rachel looked out at the city skyline. A grid of lights that suddenly felt like a cage. She checked the chamber of her gun one last time. "We're going to war, kid," she whispered. "We're going to find out what your father did." They vanished into the shadows of the fire escape, leaving the warm light of their old life behind, stepping into a cold, dark world where $1 billion was hidden in a toy. And every shadow held a knife. The hunt had begun. The Chicago wind cut through wet denim like a serrated knife. Rachel didn't feel the cold. She didn't feel the throb in her knee or the sting of the cut on her temple. She only felt the small, trembling hand gripping hers. They were 3 blocks away from the apartment, tucked into the shadow of a dumpster behind a Thai restaurant. The air smelled of rotten cabbage and old fryer oil. "Mom, my backpack is heavy," Logan whispered. His voice was small, fragile. Rachel knelt in the muck, ignoring the stain spreading on her jeans. She grabbed his shoulders, looking him dead in the eye. "Listen to me, Lo. We are playing the ghost game now. Do you remember the rules?" Logan sniffed, wiping his nose on his sleeve. "Don't be seen. Don't be heard. Be a ghost." "That's right. From this moment on, Rachel and Logan Stone don't exist. We are just shadows. Can you be a shadow for me?" He nodded, clutching the straps of his backpack where the red robot sat like a lead weight. Rachel checked her watch. 8:14 p.m. The police scanners would be lighting up. The men in her apartment, the ledger's cleaners, would have a containment team setting up a perimeter. They would expect her to go for her car. A battered Ford Explorer parked a block away. She pulled the keys to the Ford from her pocket and dropped them into a sewer grate. Splash. Come on. She didn't run. Running attracted attention. They walked briskly, heads down, merging into the flow of pedestrians heading toward the Red Line L train station. Rachel pulled her hood up. She bought 2 tickets with cash, crisp $20 bills from her go bag. No credit cards. Credit cards were GPS trackers with a spending limit. They squeezed onto a crowded train car. The smell of wet bodies and ozone was suffocating. Rachel positioned Logan in a corner seat and stood over him, blocking him from view with her body. She watched the reflection in the dark train window, scanning the faces behind her. A businessman on his phone, a teenager with headphones, an exhausted nurse. No tactical gear, no earpieces. For now, they were clear. 2 hours later, they were 60 miles south of the city, in a town that consisted of 2 gas stations and a decaying strip mall. They had switched trains twice, then taken a cash-only cab to a truck stop, and finally hitched a ride with a female trucker named Barb who thought Rachel was fleeing an abusive boyfriend. In a way, she was, just not the kind Barb imagined. They checked into the Starlight Motel. It was the kind of place where the vacancy sign buzzed like an angry hornet and the carpet was sticky. Perfect. These places didn't ask for ID if you flashed enough cash. Rachel locked the door, engaged the chain, and then wedged a wooden chair under the handle. Only then did she let out the breath she felt like she'd been holding since Chicago. "Mom? Is Dad really gone?" The question hung in the stale air of the motel room. Rachel turned. Logan was sitting on the edge of the sagging mattress, the red robot on his lap. He looked so small, too small for this world. Rachel sat beside him and pulled him into her chest. She didn't lie to him. She never did. "Yes, baby, he is." Logan buried his face in her shirt. He didn't scream. He just shook, silent, racking sobs that hurt Rachel more than the bullet wounds she'd taken overseas. She held him until the shaking stopped, until exhaustion took over and his breathing evened out into sleep. She tucked him in, fully dressed, shoes on, just in case. Rachel went to the bathroom sink. She washed the blood from her temple, wincing as the water hit the raw skin. She applied butterfly stitches from her first aid kit, staring at her reflection. The eyes looking back were hard, hollow, killer's eyes, Mark used to say, but they keep us safe. She walked back into the room and picked up the robot. It sat on the cheap laminate table under the harsh light of a single lamp. It looked innocent, a retro toy. The Iron Giant meets the Jetsons. Scuffed red paint, heavy die-cast metal. "What did you do, Mark?" she whispered. "What did you steal?" She examined it. No USB ports. No seams that suggested a hidden drive. It was just a battery-operated toy. She flipped the switch. System. Online. The robot chirped. The amber dome head swirled with light. Rachel turned it over. The note was still there, for his future. Mark liked puzzles. He was a cryptographer for a bank before his gambling addiction spiraled. He saw patterns where others saw chaos. For his future. Rachel looked at Logan sleeping. Then she looked at the robot's hands. The fingers were articulated, pliable. She remembered something. A memory from 10 years ago. When they were dating, Mark was teaching her piano. It's all about the chords. Rachel, C major. The happy chord, C E G. She looked at the robot's chest. There were 3 decorative buttons. One shaped like a crescent moon. One like an eye. One like a globe. C E G. Rachel's heart hammered against her ribs. She pressed the buttons simultaneously. Nothing happened. Damn it, she hissed. She looked closer. The robot's arms. They could rotate. She lifted the left arm to point at the I button and the right arm to point at the globe. Then she pressed the crescent. Click. A mechanical hiss sounded from the robot's chest. The metal plate with the buttons didn't pop open, it slid down. Behind it wasn't a hollow space, but a small, high-resolution LCD screen embedded in the toy's chassis. The screen flickered to life. Static at first, then a logo appeared, a stylized, black ledger book. Then, a face. It was Mark. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes. A nervous tick in his jaw. He was filming himself in a car, looking over his shoulder every few seconds. If you're seeing this, Rachel, God, I'm so sorry. Mark's voice was tinny coming through the robot's speaker. Rachel turned the volume down instantly. I thought I could win it back. The money I lost. I found a vulnerability in the ledger's exchange. A back door. I thought I was skimming off the top of some cartel's money laundering operation. I didn't know it was them. Mark wiped sweat from his forehead on the screen. It's not just money. Rach, I didn't just steal their Bitcoin. I stole the private key to their master wallet. But it's worse. Embedded in the blockchain transaction is a list. Names, judges, senators, cartel bosses, dirty cops, everyone on the ledger's payroll. That's why they can't just kill me. They need the key back to scrub the data before the FBI finds the leak. Rachel felt the blood drain from her face. This wasn't a robbery. This was a death warrant for half the corrupt officials in the Western Hemisphere. I encrypted the key inside this bot's OS. Mark continued, tears welling in his eyes. It's a rolling code. It changes every 12 hours. You need a biometric scan to unlock the final sequence. My biometrics won't work anymore. I said it to the only other person I trust. The only person whose future matters. Mark leaned into the camera. It's keyed to Logan's retina. Don't let them take him. Rachel, if they get the boy, they get the money, and they erase the evidence. If you want to survive, you have to find the architect. He's the only one who can extract the data without triggering the kill switch. He's in New Orleans. Look for the Black King bar. The video froze. Then, a countdown timer appeared on the tiny screen. 11 hours 59 minutes and 45 seconds. 44. 43. The robot powered down. The chest plate slid back up with a click. Rachel sat in the silence of the motel room, the weight of the revelation crushing her. They didn't just want the toy. They needed Logan. Her 6-year-old son was the living, breathing key to a billion-dollar criminal empire. And every dirty cop and hitman between Chicago and New Orleans was about to be hunting them. She looked at the door. The wooden chair wedged under the handle suddenly seemed very flimsy. Rachel stood up. She went to her bag and pulled out a map of the United States. She traced the line from Illinois to Louisiana. The Mississippi River run. New Orleans, she whispered. She walked over to the window and peered through the crack in the curtains. Outside, in the parking lot, a black SUV rolled slowly past the motel entrance. Its headlights were off. Rachel didn't panic. She reached down and woke Logan. "Up, soldier," she said, her voice steady as steel. "Time to move. We're going to see the jazzman." She chambered a round in her Glock. The night was far from over. The neon sign of the Starlight Motel buzzed like a dying insect. "No. Can. Sigh." Rachel watched through the gap in the curtains. The black SUV was still there, idling in the spot 2 doors down. She didn't need night vision to know who was inside. They were spotters, low-level contractors hired to watch the highways, waiting for a woman and a child to slip up. "Logan," Rachel whispered, not turning her head. "Shoes tied?" "Double knot," Logan replied. He was sitting by the bathroom door, clutching the robot. "Good. We're not going out the front." Rachel moved to the bathroom. The window was small, frosted glass, high up on the wall. She climbed onto the toilet tank, unlatched the lock, and pushed. It stuck. Decades of paint and grime held it fast. She gritted her teeth, braced her good leg against the wall, and shoved, with a crack that sounded like a gunshot in the silence. The frame gave way. Cold, wet air rushed in. "Backpack first," she ordered. She lowered Logan's bag out into the alleyway mud. Then she lifted Logan. He was heavy for 6. But adrenaline made him feel like a feather. "Feet down. Roll when you hit the grass. Go." He wriggled through. A soft thump outside. Rachel squeezed through after him. The rough stucco scratched her back, tearing her jacket. She dropped into the mud beside her son. "Stay low," she hissed. They crawled along the back wall of the motel, shielded by the overgrown weeds and rusted AC units. The rain had turned into a steady, freezing drizzle. They reached the edge of the property. Beyond a chain-link fence lay a 24-hour truck-stop diner, Big Al's Eats. 18-wheelers were lined up like sleeping giants, their engines rumbling in the dark. "We need wheels," Rachel muttered, "something invisible." Her eyes scanned the lot. A shiny new Ford F-150? Too noticeable. A red sports car? Police magnet. Then she saw it, parked near the air pump, away from the lights. An older model Chevrolet Tahoe. Faded tan, with a dent in the rear bumper and a "Support Our Troops" sticker on the back window. It was the most boring car in the world. Perfect. They approached cautiously. The diner was busy. Rachel peered inside the Tahoe. Empty. She checked the ignition. No keys. "Mom, are we stealing?" Logan asked, his voice trembling. Rachel looked down at him. Rain dripped from her nose. "We are borrowing. Logan, if we don't, the men in the black car will find us. And they won't let us leave." She pulled a slim piece of metal from her pocket, a tension wrench she kept in her kit. But before she could jam it into the lock, a man walked out of the diner's restroom around the side of the building. He was older, wearing a grease-stained trucker hat, fumbling with a pack of cigarettes. He saw them. Rachel froze. Her hand went to the Glock under her jacket. The man squinted. He looked at Rachel's wet clothes, the bandage on her temple, and the scared boy clutching a robot. He didn't see a criminal. He saw a desperate mother. "Rough night, darlin'?" the man asked, his voice raspy. Rachel didn't blink. "Car broke down 3 miles back. My phone's dead. Just trying to get my boy to his grandma's in Memphis." The lie came out smooth. Practiced. The man took a drag of his cigarette, looking at the Tahoe, then back at Rachel. He reached into his pocket. Rachel's muscles tensed, ready to spring. He pulled out a set of keys. Heater takes a minute to warm up, he said, tossing the keys to her. Don't scratch it. Leave it at the Greyhound station in Memphis. I got a spare key under the frame. Rachel caught the keys, stunned. Why? My daughter had a rough night once, the man said, turning away to walk back into the diner. Nobody helped her. Get gone. Rachel didn't waste a second. Get in. They scrambled into the Tahoe. The engine roared to life with a comforting rumble. Rachel threw it into reverse, backed out, and hit the access road just as the black SUV from the motel peeled out of the parking lot. Heading the wrong way. They were ghosts again. Interstate 57, southbound. The highway was a ribbon of black cutting through the cornfields of southern Illinois. The rhythm of the windshield wipers was hypnotic. Slap swish. Slap swish. Logan was asleep in the passenger seat. The robot buckled in with the seat belt next to him. Rachel kept the speedometer at exactly 68 miles per hour. 3 miles over the limit. Fast enough to look normal. Slow enough to avoid a ticket. She turned on the radio. Keeping the volume low. Local news. Police are searching for a suspect in connection with a shooting on the south side of Chicago. Rachel Stone, 32, former military personnel, is considered armed and dangerous. She is believed to have abducted her 6-year-old son. Rachel griped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. Abducted. They were twisting the narrative. The Ledger owned the media. Or at least the police sources feeding the media. She wasn't a victim anymore. She was a fugitive. Suddenly, lights flashed in her rearview mirror. Blue and red. Rachel's heart slammed against her ribs. She checked her speed. 68. She checked her lane. Center. Damn it, she whispered. Mom? Logan woke up, rubbing his eyes. Is it them? Stay calm. Baby. Don't speak. Let me do the talking. She pulled over onto the gravel shoulder. The police cruiser pulled in behind her. Blinding spotlight hitting her side mirror. Rachel rolled down the window. She kept her hands on the wheel at 10 and 2. Visible. Non-threatening. A figure approached. Trooper hat. Flashlight beam cutting through the rain. Evening. Ma'am. The voice was deep. Southern. Good evening, officer. Was I speeding? The flashlight beam hit her face. It lingered on the cut on her temple. Then it moved to Logan. Then to the robot. Taillights out, the officer said, but he didn't looking at the back of the car. He was looking at her. License and registration. Rachel reached for her bag. It's a borrowed car. Officer. My friend. Step out of the vehicle. Ms. Stone. The air left the car. He knew her name. He hadn't run the plates. He hadn't asked for ID. He knew. Rachel looked at his uniform. The badge was real, but his eyes, they were too eager. He wasn't a cop doing a job. He was a hunter claiming a prize. I said step out. The officer unclipped the strap on his holster. Okay, Rachel said, her voice trembling, a performance. Please, don't scare my son. She opened the door and stepped into the rain. Hands raised. Turn around. Hands on the hood. The officer commanded. He stepped closer. Too close. He was confident. He thought she was just a scared mom. He forgot she was a sergeant. As he reached for his cuffs, Rachel moved. She spun, her left arm deflecting his reach, her right elbow driving backward into his solar plexus. The officer grunted, doubling over. He was strong, though. He grabbed her jacket, slamming her against the side of the Tahoe. You bitch. He reached for his gun. Rachel stomped on his instep. shattering the small bones in his foot. As he screamed, she headbutted him, hard. Her forehead connected with his nose. Crack. He stumbled back, blood gushing, blinding him. Rachel didn't draw her gun. A gunshot would draw attention. She swept his legs, sending him crashing into the mud. Before he could rise, she was on him, knee pressing into his throat, cutting off his air. "Who sent you?" she snarled, the rain washing the blood from her face. The officer gasped, clawing at her leg. "The bounty. It's open, contract. $5 million. $5 million. Every dirty cop, every gangbanger, every desperate soul with a gun would be looking for them." Rachel applied pressure. The officer's eyes rolled back. He went limp, unconscious. She stood up, panting. She quickly searched him. She took his radio, turned off, his handcuffs, and his wallet. Then she dragged him into the ditch, cuffing his hands to a fence post deep in the tall grass. She walked back to the car. Logan was staring at her, eyes wide. He had seen it all. Rachel got in and slammed the door. She didn't try to hide her shaking hands this time. "Mom?" Logan whispered. "You hurt him. He was going to hurt us. Lo, he was a bad man pretending to be a good man." Logan looked down at the robot. The amber light on its head pulsed slowly, like a heartbeat. "Are we safe?" Rachel put the car in gear. She looked at the endless, dark road ahead. The rain was falling harder now, turning the world into a blur. "No," she said, her voice hard as iron. "We're not safe, but we're dangerous." She floored the gas pedal. The Tahoe surged forward, leaving the unconscious hunter in the dark, racing toward the Mississippi River. Next stop, Memphis. And then, the architect. New Orleans didn't just welcome you, it swallowed you whole. The air was thick enough to chew, a gumbo of humidity. River mud, stale beer, and expensive perfume. It was 11 p.m. when Rachel and Logan stepped off the Greyhound bus on the outskirts of the French Quarter. They had ditched the battered Tahoe 50 miles back in a swampy turnout, wiping it clean of prints and sinking it halfway into the bayou. "Stay close," Rachel murmured, her hand resting on the back of Logan's neck. "It's loud here," Logan said, clutching his backpack. The robot, silent now to conserve battery, was a heavy lump against his spine. "Loud is good," Rachel replied. "Noise covers footsteps." They moved through the throngs of tourists on Bourbon Street. Neon signs flashed in a dizzying rhythm, live jazz. Daiquiris. Girls. 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 Drunken revelers stumbled out of bars, spilling drinks and laughter into the gutters. To anyone watching, Rachel was just another exhausted tourist dragging a tired kid back to a hotel. But Rachel wasn't watching the show. She was watching the reflections in the puddles. She was scanning the rooftops. She was counting the exits. The text from Mark's video had been specific: the Black King. Ask for the architect. Don't let them see the boy. They turned off the main strip onto a narrower, darker street. The noise faded to a dull roar. The buildings here were older, their wrought iron balconies sagging like tired eyelids. "There," Rachel whispered. At the end of the block, a small, unassuming sign swung in the breeze. A simple black crown painted on weathered wood. The Black King. It wasn't a tourist trap. It was a dive bar for locals, the kind of place where you wiped your feet on the way out. Rachel knelt down in front of Logan. "Listen to me. We are going inside. You are going to sit in a booth. You do not speak to anyone. You do not look at anyone. You play your game on your tablet. If I say, run, you drop the backpack and you run for the back door. Do not look back for me. Do you understand? Logan's eyes were wide, reflecting the red neon of a nearby sign. I leave the robot? You leave everything. Your life is the only thing that matters. He nodded. A small, solemn soldier. Rachel stood up, adjusted her jacket to cover the Glock at her waist, and pushed open the heavy oak door. The air inside was cool and smelled of cigar smoke and old mahogany. A jazz trio was playing in the corner, a slow, mournful saxophone melody that seemed to weep. The bar was dimly lit. A few patrons sat hunched over drinks, nursing their demons. Rachel walked to the bar. The bartender was a giant of a man, bald, with arms like tree trunks covered in faded navy tattoos. He was wiping a glass with a rag that looked grayer than the smoke. "Help you?" he grumbled, not looking up. "I'm looking for a builder," Rachel said, her voice steady. The bartender paused. He set the glass down. "We don't do construction here, lady. Not that kind of builder." Rachel leaned in, sliding a folded $100 bill across the sticky wood. "I'm looking for the architect. Tell him I have the keystone." The bartender's eyes flicked to the money, then to Rachel's face, then to Logan standing silently by a booth near the door. His expression hardened. "Wait here." He disappeared through a beaded curtain behind the bar. Rachel turned, putting her back to the bar, scanning the room. The saxophone player watched her. The man in the corner with the fedora watched her. Every muscle in her body was coiled, ready to snap. 5 minutes passed, long enough for a SWAT team to breach, long enough to die. The beaded curtain rattled. The bartender returned. "Back room, just you. The kid stays." "No," Rachel said instantly. "The kid comes." The bartender crossed his massive arms. "Boss doesn't like kids. And I don't like leaving my son with strangers in a bar full of cop killers." Rachel shot back, her voice low and lethal. "He comes, or I start breaking things. Starting with your nose." The bartender stared at her. He saw the scar on her temple. He saw the way she stood, balanced, weight distributed. He grunted, a sound that might have been a laugh. "Feisty. Fine. Bring the runt." He buzzed a lock under the counter. A heavy steel door disguised as a wall panel clicked open. Rachel grabbed Logan's hand and pulled him through. The room beyond was a stark contrast to the bar. It was soundproofed, lined with white acoustic foam. Banks of servers hummed along the walls, their blue lights blinking in the dark. In the center of the room sat a massive desk made of glass, surrounded by 6 monitors. Sitting behind the desk was not a man. It was a woman. She was tiny, maybe 60 years old, with sharp features and silver hair cut in a severe bob. She wore a pristine white suit that looked ridiculous in the grime of New Orleans. She was typing furiously on a mechanical keyboard. "You're late," the woman said, her voice crisp, British accent. She didn't look up. "Mark said you were punctual." Rachel stepped forward, keeping Logan behind her. "You're the architect? I'm the one who built the labyrinth your husband used to steal a fortune." The woman swiveled her chair around. Her eyes were piercingly blue, magnified by thick glasses. "I am the architect. And you must be Sergeant Stone. And this." She looked at Logan. Her gaze softened. "Just a fraction. This must be the safe deposit box." "He has a name," Rachel said coldly. "Logan. Names are dangerous. Sergeant. Numbers are safer. Show me the device." Rachel nodded to Logan. He unzipped his backpack and pulled out the red robot. He placed it on the glass desk. The architect looked at the toy with something approaching reverence. Crude, but effective. Mark always did have a flair for the dramatic. She plugged a cable from her console into a hidden port under the robot's foot, a port Rachel hadn't even seen. "I'm scanning the encryption," the architect muttered, her fingers flying across the keys. Text cascaded down her screens, green waterfalls of code. Suddenly, the screens turned red. A klaxon blared softly from the computer. "Access denied. Biometric mismatch." "It's locked," the architect said, looking up. "The rolling code has shifted. It requires the secondary key." Mark said it was Logan. Rachel said, "His retina." "It is." The architect stood up. She picked up a small, handheld scanner. "But it's not just a scan. It's a sequence. The robot needs to see the boy. But the boy needs to interact with it." Mark programmed a fail-safe. If the boy is under duress, if he's crying, if his heart rate is too high, the key destroys itself. Rachel felt a chill. He has to be calm? He has to be happy. The architect corrected. Or at least, safe. The algorithm reads micro-expressions. It's looking for the bond. It's looking for love, Sergeant. If it detects fear, it wipes the drive. $1 billion. Gone. Rachel looked at Logan. He was terrified. He was dirty, exhausted, and surrounded by strangers in a terrifying room. "We have a problem," Rachel said. "We have half the cartel hunting us. How the hell am I supposed to make him feel safe?" Before the architect could answer, a red light flashed on the wall. "External sensors triggered," the architect said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Perimeter breach. Alleyway. 4 targets. Heavy weapons." Rachel drew her Glock. "They found us. They tracked the thermal signature of the robot's battery," the architect said, tapping a key. "I have a secure exit. But you need to buy me time to copy the drive. If we disconnect now, the data corrupts." "How much time?" Rachel checked the magazine. 3 minutes. 3 minutes is a lifetime, Rachel said. She looked at Logan. "Lo, put your headphones on. Play your game. Don't look up." She turned to the steel door. "Get your data, lady," Rachel said, racking the slide of her pistol. "I'll hold the door." Boom. The first explosion rocked the building. Dust fell from the ceiling. The jazz music outside stopped abruptly, replaced by screams. The ledger had arrived in New Orleans. And this time, they weren't sending cleaners. They were sending a hit squad. Boom. The steel door of the architect's sanctuary didn't just open, it warped. The hinges screamed as a breaching charge detonated, sending a cloud of drywall dust into the room. "Get down," Rachel yelled, spinning toward the door. She didn't wait for a target. She fired blindly through the smoke, 2 rounds. Low, pop pop. A scream of pain echoed from the hallway. A man fell, clutching his shin. "Suppressing," a voice shouted from the corridor. Automatic gunfire erupted, chewing into the doorframe, sending splinters of wood flying like shrapnel. Rachel dove behind a stack of servers. "Architect, how much time?" 90 seconds. The architect didn't look up from her keyboard. Her fingers were a blur. On the screen, a progress bar crawled forward agonizingly slow, 72%. 73%. Rachel glanced at Logan. He was huddled under the glass desk. Hands over his ears. Eyes squeezed shut. The robot on the desk was flashing red. "Warning. Biometric sync failing. Pulse elevated." He's panicking, the architect shouted over the gunfire. If he spikes, the drive wipes. Talk to him, Stone. Rachel grit her teeth. She popped up, fired 2 rounds to keep the attackers back, and then dropped down to crawl toward the desk. Bullets sparked off the metal server racks above her head. She reached under the desk and grabbed Logan's trembling hand. "Hey, Lo," she shouted, forcing a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Look at me." Logan opened one eye. He was hyperventilating. "Is this the boss fight?" he squeaked. Rachel's heart broke, but she shoved the pieces down. "Yeah, baby. This is the boss level. But guess what? We have a cheat code." She squeezed his hand. "Remember the lullaby? The one about the little soldier? The brave tin soldier? Sing it with me, right now, loud." I can't. "Sing it," Rachel roared, firing another shot over the desk without looking. Then her voice softened instantly. "Once there was a soldier, made of tin and pride." Logan's voice joined hers, shaky and thin. He had a paper hat, and a sword by his side. On the screen, the red flashing light turned yellow. Then green. Sync restored. Data transfer. 98%. 99%. Done. The architect slapped the enter key. She pulled a small, silver flash drive from the console. "I have the ledger, the names, the accounts, but the money, the private key, is still in the robot. You have to keep the physical toy safe." The gunfire stopped. The silence was worse. They were reloading, or preparing a grenade. "We need to move," Rachel said, grabbing the robot and shoving it into Logan's arms. "Is there a back way?" The architect stood up. She smoothed her white suit, looking incredibly calm for a woman whose office was being turned into Swiss cheese. She pressed a hidden button under the desk. A bookshelf on the far wall clicked and swung open, revealing a dark, moldy tunnel. "This leads to the drainage system under St. Louis Cemetery," the architect said. She handed Rachel the flash drive. "Take this. If you release the names on this drive, the ledger collapses, but they will hunt you to the ends of the earth for it." "Aren't you coming?" Rachel asked. The architect pulled a sleek, silver pistol from a drawer. A Walther PPK. Classic. "I'm 72 years old. Sergeant. My knees can't handle sewers. Besides," she smiled, a cold, sharp smile, "I built this room. I know how to bring it down." She pointed to the servers. "I'm going to magnetize the drives. It will fry everything in a 10-block radius. Go." Rachel hesitated. A soldier never leaves a man behind. "Go," the architect shouted. Rachel grabbed Logan. "Move, soldier." They sprinted into the darkness of the tunnel. Behind them, Rachel heard the architect's voice, calm and defiant. "Gentlemen, do you have an appointment?" Then, a massive, magnetic hum, like a giant power transformer exploding, shook the floor. The lights in the tunnel died. The hum was followed by screams of confusion. Rachel didn't look back. She turned on her tactical flashlight and ran. The French Quarter, 10 minutes later. They emerged from a rusted grate in an alleyway behind the cemetery. The air was fresher here, smelling of rain and jasmine. "Mom, I'm tired," Logan whimpered. He was stumbling. "I know, baby, I know." Rachel scooped him up. Her bad knee screamed in protest. A hot needle of pain shooting up her thigh. She ignored it. Pain is just information. They stepped out onto the main street and walked straight into a wall of sound. Ba-da-da-da. A brass band, A dozen musicians in bright uniforms were marching down the street. Trombones sliding, trumpets blaring a raucous, joyous tune. Behind them, a crowd of 100 people danced, waving handkerchiefs and umbrellas. A second line parade. A traditional New Orleans celebration. Rachel pulled Logan close, hiding his face in her shoulder. "Keep your head down, we're joining the party." She merged into the crowd. The music was deafening. It was the perfect cover. But the Ledger's men were professionals. Rachel saw them, 3 men in dark raincoats, moving against the flow of the dancers. They weren't looking at the band. They were scanning faces. One of them, a tall man with a scar running through his eyebrow, locked eyes with her. He tapped his earpiece. "Maid." Rachel didn't run. Running in a crowd would cause a stampede. She started to dance. She moved with the rhythm, weaving between a tuba player and a woman waving a white parasol. She used the people as human shields. The scarred man pushed through the crowd, his hand going into his coat. He was 10 feet away. Rachel waited. 5 feet. The band hit a crescendo. The cymbal crashed. Now. Rachel grabbed a discarded glass bottle from a trash can as she spun. She didn't throw it. She smashed it against a brick wall, keeping the jagged neck. The scarred man lunged. Rachel sidestepped, using the momentum of a dancing couple to block his view for a split second. When he reappeared, she was inside his guard. She didn't use the bottle on his face. She jammed it into his thigh, twisting. He opened his mouth to scream, but the trumpet section blasted a high note right next to his ear, drowning him out. He collapsed, lost in the sea of dancing legs. Rachel dropped the glass and kept moving, pushing deeper into the procession. "Don't look back. Low. Just listen to the music." They reached the corner of the cemetery. The famous St. Louis number 1. The Cities of the Dead. White, above-ground tombs rising like miniature houses in the moonlight. "In here," Rachel whispered. She vaulted the low iron fence, pulling Logan over. They landed in the soft, wet grass among the graves. The music from the street faded, replaced by the chirping of crickets and the distant sirens. "Are we safe?" Logan asked, clutching the robot. Rachel looked at the maze of tombs. It was a tactical nightmare. Too many corners, too many shadows. "No," she said, reloading her Glock. She had 3 rounds left. "We're cornered." She saw movement near the gate. 2 shadows. They had flanked her. The man she stabbed was down, but his partners were here. Rachel looked at the flash drive in her pocket, then at the robot. "Logan," she whispered, pointing to a large, ornate tomb with a stone angel on top. "Hide in there, under the angel's wing. Count to 100. If I don't come for you." She took a deep breath. You run to the police station. You show them the drive. Do not stop for me." "Mom. Go." Logan scrambled into the hiding spot. Rachel stood up. She stepped out into the main path of the cemetery, the moonlight illuminating her silhouette. She was the bait. "Hey," she yelled, her voice echoing off the stone crypts. "You want the key? Come and get it." The 2 shadows stopped. They raised their weapons. Rachel raised hers. But she didn't fire. She aimed at the stone angel above the shadows. Specifically, at the rusted iron chain holding a massive, suspended stone vase. 1 shot. She squeezed the trigger. Ping. The bullet sparked off the chain. The rusted link snapped. The stone vase, weighing 200 pounds, plummeted. It crashed onto the path right between the two men, exploding into shrapnel. Dust and stone chips flew like grenades. Ideally, it would have crushed them. Practically, it was a distraction. While they flinched, shielding their faces, Rachel charged. She wasn't a soldier anymore. She was a mother, and that was far more terrifying. She tackled the first man, driving him into a tombstone. His gun clattered away. She used her pistol like a hammer, striking his temple. He went down. The second man recovered. He leveled his MP5 at her. "Drop it," he screamed. Rachel froze. She was 5 feet away. Too far to reach him. Empty gun. "It's over, Stone," the man sneered. "Give me the boy." Suddenly, a red light beam hit the man's chest. It wasn't a laser sight. It was the robot. Logan was standing on top of the angel tomb, holding the robot up like a weapon. He had flipped the switch. The robot's arm was raised, pointing at the man. "Leave my mom alone," the boy screamed. The man hesitated. He looked at the toy. He laughed. "Or what? You gonna shoot me with a flashlight, kid?" He took a step forward. Click. The robot's arm fired. Not a laser. A projectile. The hand of the robot detached, propelled by a high-tension spring, a classic 1950s toy mechanism. It flew through the air and hit the man square in the eye. It wasn't lethal, but it was shocking. The man flinched, his hand flying to his face, his finger tightening on the trigger reflexively. He fired a burst into the sky. That 1 second of distraction was all Rachel needed. She pulled the knife from her boot, a cob bar she had carried since Afghanistan, and threw it. It was a desperate throw. But luck favors the bold. The handle hit the man in the throat. He gagged, stumbling back, tripping over a grave marker. He fell hard, hitting his head on the stone corner of a crypt. He didn't get up. Silence returned to the graveyard. Rachel ran to the tomb. She grabbed Logan, hugging him so hard it hurt. "You saved me," she whispered into his hair, tears finally spilling over. "You saved me, Lo." Logan looked at the robot. It was missing a hand. "I broke it," he whispered. Rachel laughed. A wet, ragged sound. "We can fix it, baby. We can fix everything." She looked at the unconscious men. They had a few minutes before more came. "We need to get out of the city," she said. "We have the drive. We have the robot. Now we need to disappear." "Where?" Logan asked. Rachel looked north. "We need a ghost. I know an old pilot in the bayou. If he's still alive, he owes me a favor." She picked up the detached robot hand and put it in her pocket. "Let's go find a boat." The city of New Orleans faded behind them, replaced by a darkness so absolute it felt like a physical weight. Rachel drove a stolen 1998 Ford pickup, its headlights cutting through the thick, swirling mist of the Louisiana backroads. The radio was dead. The heater was broken. The only sound was the hum of the tires on wet gravel and Logan's shallow breathing. "Where are we going?" Logan asked. He was shivering, clutching the one-handed robot to his chest like a lifeline. "To see an old friend," Rachel said, eyes scanning the rearview mirror. No lights behind them. "Yet. His name is Cyrus. He was a medic in my unit. He lives where people don't ask questions." They turned off the paved road onto a dirt track that disappeared into the swamp. The air changed instantly. It smelled of sulfur, rotting vegetation, and stagnant water. Spanish moss hung from the cypress trees like tattered ghosts, brushing the roof of the truck. Thump! The road ended. Literally. It just dropped off into the black water of the bayou. Rachel killed the engine. End of the line. We walk from here. Walk on water? Logan looked at the black expanse. No, we signal. Rachel grabbed the flashlight from the glove box. She stepped out into the mud. The humidity instantly plastering her shirt to her skin. She aimed the light across the water. Toward a faint, flickering orange glow about half a mile out. 3 short flashes. 1 long, 2 short. A pause. Then, the orange light out in the swamp blinked back. 1 long, 1 short. He's home, Rachel whispered. A few minutes later, the low hum of an outboard motor broke the silence. A flat-bottomed aluminum skiff emerged from the mist. The man steering it looked like he was carved out of the cypress trees themselves. Cyrus was massive, with a beard that reached his chest and skin like leather. He wore overalls and held a pump-action shotgun across his lap. He didn't smile. He racked the slide. Chakak. You bring trouble, Stone? His voice was a deep rumble, thick with a Cajun drawl. Trouble found me, Cyrus, Rachel said, keeping her hands visible. I need a way out. The boy is clean. I'm compromised. Cyrus spat into the water. He looked at Logan, then at the red robot. His eyes softened. Get in, but if I see a drone, you're swimming with the gators. They climbed into the skiff. The boat turned and vanished into the labyrinth of the swamp. Cyrus's shack, the middle of nowhere. The shack was built on stilts, hovering over the water like a giant spider. Inside, it was warm, smelling of chicory coffee and gun oil. Cyrus threw a towel at Rachel. You look like hell warmed over. Feels like it too, Rachel said, wiping the mud from her face. She sat Logan near the wood stove. We need a plane, Cyrus. The airstrip at Bro Bridge. Can you get us there? Cyrus poured coffee into tin mugs. Bro Bridge is watched. The Ledger owns the local sheriff. If you go there, you're dead. Rachel's heart sank. Then where? There's a smuggler's run south of here. Old oil pipeline canal. Leads to the Gulf. I got a buddy with a float plane. But, Cyrus hesitated. The water levels are low. And the gators are hungry tonight. Suddenly, a high-pitched whine cut through the air. Like a swarm of angry hornets. Cyrus froze. He killed the lantern. Drones. He hissed. Rachel grabbed her Glock. They tracked the truck. No. Cyrus moved to the window. Peering through the slats, they tracked the thermal signature. Look. Through the window, Rachel saw them, 2 miles out, but closing fast. Huge lights sweeping across the water. The roar of V8 engines. Airboats. These weren't police. These were cartel assault boats. We gotta go, Cyrus said, grabbing a rusted ammo box and an M4 carbine from under his cot. My boat's too slow for airboats. We take the Phantom. They ran out the back door to a hidden dock. Under a tarp lay a sleek, black hydrofoil boat. It looked like something out of a Batman movie. Stripped down and mean. Get the boy in the well, Cyrus shouted as the roar of the approaching airboats grew deafening. Rachel threw Logan into the center depression of the boat and jumped in beside him. Cyrus fired up the engine. It didn't roar, it screamed. The Phantom shot forward, lifting out of the water, skimming the surface at 60 miles per hour. Hold on, Cyrus yelled over the wind. Behind them, 3 massive fan boats burst through the mist. Their spotlights blinding. Muzzle flashes sparkled from the lead boat. Bullets zipped past them, hitting the water like angry rain. Ping! A round sparked off the Phantom's engine cowling. "Take the wheel," Cyrus shouted to Rachel. "What?" "I said take it. Keep her steady in the channel. Don't hit the cypress knees or you'll rip the hull open." Rachel scrambled into the pilot's seat. She gripped the wheel, her knuckles white. The swamp was a blur of shadows and deadly trees. Cyrus stood up in the back, bracing himself against the roll bar. He raised the M4. "Welcome to the bayou, boys," he roared. He opened fire. Bang bang bang. The lead airboat swerved as Cyrus's rounds sparked off its fan cage. But they were armored, and they had a mounted machine gun. Thump thump thump. Heavy caliber rounds chewed up the water inches from the Phantom. "They're too fast," Rachel yelled. "We can't outrun them in the straits." "Turn left." Cyrus pointed to a narrow, choked inlet filled with hanging vines. "The Devil's Gut. That's suicide." "Do it." Rachel yanked the wheel hard left. The boat banked sharply, spraying a wall of water. They shot into the narrow channel. The trees here were ancient, their roots forming a deadly obstacle course. The airboats followed, but they were wider, clumsier. The first pursuer tried to take the turn too fast. Its side hit a submerged log. The boat flipped violently, sending men and equipment flying into the black water. One down, two to go. Rachel navigated the maze, relying on instinct. Left, right, duck. "Logan, keep your head down," she screamed. "Mom, the robot," Logan yelled. "It's beeping." Rachel glanced down. The robot's amber light was pulsing rapidly. Morse code? Or a proximity alarm? Not now. The channel opened up into a wide lagoon. Dead end. Rachel spun the boat around. "Cyrus, no exit." The two remaining airboats blocked the entrance to the lagoon. They cut their engines, drifting forward. The spotlights pinned Rachel and Cyrus against the wall of trees. "End of the road, Stone." A voice amplified by a loudspeaker boomed across the water. "Give us the drive, give us the toy, and maybe we let the old man live." Cyrus looked at Rachel. He was bleeding from a shrapnel wound in his shoulder. "I got maybe half a magazine left." Rachel looked at the water. It was bubbling. She looked at the fuel tank of the Phantom. Half full. She looked at the robot. The light was steady now. "Do you trust me?" she asked Cyrus. "I trusted you in Kandahar. Didn't I?" "Logan," Rachel said, her voice eerily calm. "Plug your ears. Close your eyes. Count to 10. She grabbed a flare gun from the boat's emergency kit. She didn't aim at the men. She aimed at the water around the enemy boats. Specifically, at the sheen of oil slick floating on the surface. Residue from years of illegal dumping in this lagoon. "Burn," she whispered. She pulled the trigger. The red flare hissed through the air and hit the water. Whoosh! It wasn't a movie explosion. It was a flash fire. The surface of the lagoon ignited. A ring of fire surrounding the enemy boats. The fumes caught instantly. The men on the airboats screamed as the heat hit them. Panic ensued. One pilot gunned his engine. But the fire was sucking the oxygen out of the air. The engine stalled. "Go!" Cyrus yelled. Rachel slammed the throttle. She aimed the Phantom directly at the gap between the two burning boats, through the wall of fire. "Get down!" They plunged through the flames. The heat seared Rachel's face. Smoke filled her lungs. For a second, the world was orange and terrifying. Then, they punched through to the other side. Back into the open channel. Rachel didn't stop. She drove until the fuel gauge hit empty. Miles away from the smoke rising into the night sky. She drifted the boat into a dense patch of reeds and killed the engine. Silence returned. Cyrus slumped against the gunwale, breathing heavy. Hell of a barbecue. Stone. Rachel checked Logan. He was unhurt, but silent. He was staring at the robot. "Mom," Logan whispered. "Look." Rachel looked. The heat or the impact had done something. The robot's chest plate had popped open again. But the screen wasn't showing Mark's face anymore. It was showing a map. A GPS coordinate. Latitude 25.7617 and longitude 80.1918 W. "Miami," Rachel whispered. "Miami?" Cyrus groaned, wrapping his shoulder. "Why Miami?" Rachel tapped the screen. A new message scrolled across. "The vault is physical. The key is just the start." Rachel realized the truth. The money wasn't on the internet. It wasn't in a cloud. Mark had hidden the physical cold storage hard drives somewhere in Miami. The robot was just the map to find the buried treasure. "We're not done," Rachel said, wiping soot from her forehead. "The architect gave us the names to hurt them. But if we want to stop them, we have to get to Miami before they move the vault." She looked at the moon hanging over the swamp. "Cyrus, does that floatplane buddy of yours owe you a favor?" Cyrus chuckled, a wheezing sound. "He owes me a kidney. Let's go." Rachel Stone looked south. The swamp was behind them. The ocean was ahead, and the hunt was far from over. Miami, Florida, 10 a.m. The sun in Miami didn't just shine, it glared. It bounced off the white sand, the chrome bumpers of Rolls-Royces, and the turquoise water of Biscayne Bay. Rachel Stone adjusted her sunglasses. She wore a stolen oversized linen shirt and white pants, looking like any other tourist on South Beach. But beneath the linen, the Glock 19 was pressed against the small of her back, hot against her skin. Logan walked beside her, holding a melting ice cream cone in one hand and his backpack in the other. He looked smaller here, amidst the towering palm trees and the skyscrapers that looked like needles piercing the sky. "Is the treasure here?" Logan whispered, licking a drip of chocolate. "The map says yes," Rachel replied, scanning the street. "But X marks the spot isn't usually a bank." They were standing in front of the Arian, a massive, windowless building in the design district. It wasn't a bank. It was a Freeport, a high-security storage facility for the super-rich to store art, gold, and classic cars tax-free. It was a fortress of concrete and reinforced glass. Rachel looked at the robot inside Logan's backpack. The screen was displaying a QR code now. A passkey. "Okay, Lo." Rachel knelt down, tying his shoelace to buy a moment. "This building is full of robots. Big ones. They move boxes. Your robot needs to talk to their robots." "Like a playdate?" Logan asked. Rachel smirked. "Exactly. But a very quiet playdate. We go in, we find locker 404. We get the box. And we leave. If you see anyone in a suit, you squeeze my hand." "Hard." "Check." Logan nodded. They approached the entrance. No guards. Just a biometric scanner and a camera that looked like a reptilian eye. Rachel held up the robot's screen to the scanner. Beep. The heavy glass doors hissed open. Cool, conditioned air rushed out, smelling of ozone and expensive sterility. "Mark, you genius," Rachel muttered. Her ex-husband had prepaid for a locker. The robot was the key. They stepped inside. The lobby was empty. Minimalist. White walls. White floor. A single elevator at the end of the hall. They entered the elevator. There were no buttons, just a voice command interface. Floor? A synthesized voice asked. Rachel looked at the robot's screen. It flashed. Level B4. Level B4, Rachel said clearly. The elevator didn't move. Voice authorization required, the machine said. Rachel froze. Mark's voice. They needed Mark. She looked at Logan. The video. Play the video on the robot. Logan fumbled with the toy. His sticky fingers slipping on the plastic. I can't find it. Fast. Logan, the camera is watching us. Rachel pointed to the lens in the corner of the elevator. Logan tapped the sequence. Moon. Eye. Globe. The screen lit up. Mark's face appeared again. If you're seeing this, God, I'm so sorry. The elevator paused. The AI listened. Voice print confirmed. Welcome, Mr. Stone. The car descended. Down. Deep into the bedrock of Florida. Level B4. The vault. The doors opened onto a cavernous room. It looked like the inside of a computer. Rows of steel lockers stretched into the darkness, illuminated by blue floor lights. Silence. Absolute silence. Where is 404? Logan whispered. His voice echoed. This way. Rachel led him down the aisle. 400. 402. It was a medium-sized locker. Steel-faced. With a digital keypad. Rachel looked at the robot. The screen was blank. What now? She hissed. Mark, come on. Logan lifted the robot. Mom, look at the arm. The robot's remaining arm was pointing. Not at the locker, but at a small data port underneath the keypad. A port that looked exactly like the plug on the robot's foot. He has to stand there, Logan said. He placed the robot on the floor. He pushed it until the foot connected with the port. Click. The locker hummed. The heavy steel bolts retracted. Thunk, thunk, thunk. The door swung open. Inside, there was no gold, no cash, just a single, black server rack unit, humming quietly, and sitting on top of it, a small, velvet bag. Rachel grabbed the bag. She opened it. Inside was a cold wallet, a diamond-encrusted USB drive shaped like a chess piece. The king. Is that the $1 billion? Logan asked, disappointed. It's small. It's enough to buy a country. Kid, Rachel said, pocketing the king. Let's go. She turned to leave. Clap, clap, clap. Slow, sarcastic applause echoed from the darkness of the aisle behind them. Rachel spun around, putting Logan behind her, drawing her Glock in one fluid motion. A man stepped out from the shadows of locker 420. He was tall, wearing a white bespoke suit that matched the walls. He had silver hair and a face that looked like it had been reconstructed by expensive surgeons. He held a silenced pistol loosely at his side. Behind him, 4 men in tactical gear emerged, aiming rifles at Rachel's head. Bravo, Mrs. Stone, the man said. His accent was European, smooth like expensive scotch. I must say, Mark's little treasure hunt was amusing. But the game ends here. Rachel recognized him from the files the architect had shown her. Vargo, the ledger's cleaner, the man who didn't leave witnesses. You're Vargo, Rachel said, her aim steady on his chest. And you are a nuisance. Vargo smiled. Hand over the king, and the boy, and I promise your death will be quick. And if I don't? Then I kill the boy first. Slowly. While you watch. Rachel felt Logan trembling against her leg. She tightened her grip on the gun. 5 targets. 1 magazine. No cover. Impossible odds. You want the drive? Rachel held up the velvet bag with her left hand. Take it. She tossed the bag, not at Vargo, but high into the air, over the gap between the rows of lockers. Vargo's eyes flicked up instinctively. Mistake. Rachel didn't shoot Vargo. She shot the fire suppression system pipe running along the ceiling directly above them. Bang! The pipe burst. It wasn't water. This was a server room. It was halon gas. A massive cloud of white, freezing gas exploded downward with the force of a jet engine. It engulfed Vargo and his men instantly. Halon sucks the oxygen out of the air to kill fires. It also disorients humans in seconds. Run! Rachel grabbed Logan and sprinted the opposite way, deeper into the maze of lockers. Seal the exits. Vargo screamed from inside the cloud, coughing violently. Bullets zipped past Rachel's ear, sparking off the steel lockers. Ping! Zang! She rounded a corner and skidded to a halt. A dead end. Just a wall of lockers. Mom! Logan cried. Rachel looked around frantically. There was a service hatch in the floor. Maintenance tunnel. She kicked the handle. Rusted shut? No. Magnetic lock. The robot. Rachel yelled. Does it have a hack? Logan looked at the toy in his arms. It says, "Goodbye." What? The robot's screen was flashing red. Self-destruct sequence initiated. 10 seconds. Mark's final fail-safe. If the drive was removed without the proper exit code, the robot would blow. Give it to me. Rachel snatched the robot. No, it's mine. Logan, let go. She ripped the toy from his hands. She looked at the approaching squad of gunmen. She looked at the magnetic lock on the floor. She jammed the robot onto the magnetic lock. The countdown hit 0:01. She threw herself on top of Logan, covering his body with hers. Boom! It wasn't a nuclear explosion, but it was enough. The small charge inside the robot blew the magnetic lock, and the hatch, clean off its hinges. Smoke filled the corridor. Go! Down the hole! Rachel shoved Logan into the dark opening. She looked back one last time. The red robot was gone. Just scraps of twisted metal and a shattered glass dome. Mark's final gift had done its job. She jumped into the darkness just as Vargo turned the corner. His white suit stained with soot. He fired. Rachel felt a hammer blow to her shoulder. A hit. She gritted her teeth and fell into the black, sliding down a metal chute, leaving a trail of blood on the steel. They had the money. They had escaped the trap. But the robot was dead. And Rachel was bleeding. The only way out now was through the sewers of Miami. The drainage pipe spat them out into the blinding Florida sun. Rachel hit the water first, shielding Logan's body with her own. The salt water of Biscayne Bay stung her open shoulder wound like acid, stealing the breath from her lungs. The water turned pink around her. Mom! Logan sputtered, surfacing beside her. He was coughing, his eyes red from the chlorine and salt. Swim! Rachel gasped, kicking hard with her good leg. To the ladder. Go! They were in a service canal behind the massive port cranes. 50 yards away, a sleek, white cigarette boat, a 40-foot drug runner's dream, idled at a private dock. The keys were likely in the ignition. In Miami, nobody expected you to steal a boat in broad daylight. Rachel dragged herself up the rusted ladder, hauling Logan up after her. Her left arm was useless, hanging limp at her side. The bullet had missed the bone but torn through the muscle. She was losing blood fast. "Can you run?" she asked, her vision blurring at the edges. "Yes," Logan said, grabbing her good hand. He wasn't crying anymore. He looked at the blood soaking her white shirt. "I can help." They sprinted for the boat. Rachel jumped into the pilot's seat. She punched the ignition. The twin V8 engines roared to life. A deep, guttural growl that shook the dock. "Cast off the line," she shouted. Logan scrambled to the bow. Struggling with the thick rope, he managed to unhook it just as Rachel slammed the throttles forward. The boat surged, the bow lifting high into the air. They shot out of the canal and into the open bay, weaving between massive cargo ships and luxury yachts. "We did it!" Logan yelled over the wind. Thwack! A bullet shattered the windshield inches from Rachel's face. Glass sprayed everywhere. Rachel ducked. She looked back. Vargo hadn't given up. A black interceptor boat, military grade, low and fast, was cutting through the water behind them like a shark. Vargo stood at the helm, wind whipping his silver hair, an assault rifle in his hands. He wasn't shooting to kill anymore. He was shooting to disable the engine. "Get down!" Rachel screamed, spinning the wheel hard to the right. The cigarette boat banked, spraying a massive rooster tail of water. Bullets chewed up the fiberglass hull. They were faster, but Vargo had the angle. He was cutting them off from the open ocean. "He's pushing us toward the rocks," Rachel realized. Ahead, the jagged concrete pilings of the MacArthur Causeway loomed. "Mom, the engine!" Logan pointed. Smoke was pouring from the starboard engine. A lucky shot. The boat shuddered, losing speed. 60 knots. 40 knots. Vargo was closing in. 50 feet. 30 feet. Rachel looked at Logan. He was huddled on the floor, holding the velvet bag with the USB drive. "Logan," Rachel said, her voice eerily calm amidst the chaos. "Do you trust me?" "Always," he whispered. "When I say, jump, you jump. You don't look for me. You swim for the bridge pilings and you hide. Do you understand?" "No, I'm not leaving you. You have to. You're the mission now." Rachel jammed the throttle of the remaining engine to the max. She aimed the boat not at the open water, but directly at a dredging barge anchored near the bridge. A massive wall of rusted steel. "Hold on." She didn't jump. She waited until the last second. 10 feet. 5 feet. At the moment of impact, Rachel grabbed Logan and threw him, and herself, over the side. Crash. The cigarette boat hit the steel barge at 40 miles per hour. Fiberglass exploded. The fuel tank ruptured. A fireball mushroomed into the sky. Orange and black, sending shockwaves across the water. Rachel and Logan hit the water hard. The force knocked the wind out of them. They surfaced under the shadow of the causeway, hidden by the smoke and debris. "Did we get him?" Logan gasped, treading water. Rachel wiped oil from her eyes. She scanned the smoke. The black interceptor boat hadn't crashed. Vargo had swerved at the last second. His boat was drifting now, untouched, moving slowly through the wreckage. Vargo stood on the bow, scanning the water. He saw them. "End of the line, Mrs. Stone," he called out. His voice carried over the water, cold and amused. He raised his rifle. Rachel had no gun. It was at the bottom of the bay. She had no knife. She had a bleeding shoulder and a terrified son. "Dive." Rachel pushed Logan under. Bullets hit the water around them, leaving trails of bubbles like white scars. They swam under the concrete pilings of the bridge. It was a maze of shadows and barnacles. Rachel's lungs were burning. She surfaced behind a thick concrete pillar, gasping for air. Vargo's boat bumped against the piling on the other side. He stepped off onto the concrete ledge running along the base of the bridge. He was hunting them on foot now. "Come out, Rachel." Vargo's voice echoed in the damp darkness under the bridge. "Give me the key. I'll let the boy alive. I'll even let him keep the money. The ledger only wants the names." "Liar," Rachel whispered. She looked around. A rusted rebar spike jutted out of the concrete wall near her head. She broke it off, a 6-inch shiv of rusted iron. "Stay here," she mouthed to Logan. She pushed off the wall, drifting silently through the water toward the other side of the pillar. Vargo was waiting. He wasn't stupid. He saw the ripple. As Rachel lunged out of the water, screaming, raising the spike, Vargo spun. He caught her wrist midair. He was strong, terrifyingly strong. He twisted her injured arm. Rachel cried out, dropping the spike. Vargo slammed her back against the concrete pillar, his hand around her throat, pinning her above the waterline. He pressed the barrel of his rifle against her forehead. "Predictable," Vargo sneered. "Soldiers always died trying to be heroes." Rachel clawed at his hand, her vision darkening. She couldn't breathe. "Where is it?" Vargo demanded. "Go to hell," Rachel choked out. "Fine." Vargo cocked the hammer. "I'll ask the boy after I shoot you." He tightened his finger on the trigger. Click. Nothing happened. Vargo frowned. He looked at the gun. A jam? Wet powder? Rachel saw it. Vargo didn't. Behind Vargo, clinging to the barnacles on the pillar, was Logan. He held a heavy, rusted piece of chain he had found in the water. He had swung it, not at Vargo, at the gun. The chain had wrapped around the rifle barrel just as Vargo fired, jamming the ejection port. Vargo spun around, backhanding Logan. The boy flew backward, hitting the water with a splash. "You little rat," Vargo shouted, raising the jammed rifle to use it as a club. That split second was all Rachel needed. The mother in her took over. The pain vanished. The exhaustion vanished. There was only rage. She roared, a primal sound that echoed off the bridge. She didn't use technique. She used pure force. She tackled Vargo around the waist, driving her shoulder into his gut. They both toppled off the narrow ledge, plunging into the deep water. Under the surface, it was silent. Vargo thrashed, trying to kick her off. He was heavy, his tactical gear dragging him down. Rachel wrapped her legs around him, locking him in a death grip. She didn't need air. She needed him dead. He clawed at her face, gouging her cheek. Rachel grabbed the tactical knife from his vest. She pulled it. She drove it into the gap in his armor. Once, twice. Vargo's eyes went wide. Bubbles escaped his mouth, a final scream. He stopped moving. His body went limp, sinking into the dark abyss of the channel. Rachel let go. She kicked for the surface. Her lungs were screaming. Black spots danced in her eyes. She broke the surface, gasping, coughing up water. "Mom." Logan was clinging to a floating piece of the boat wreckage. He was crying. Rachel swam to him. She grabbed him, hugging him so tight she thought she might break his ribs. "I got you," she sobbed, the adrenaline crashing, leaving her shaking uncontrollably. "I got you, baby. It's over." Sirens wailed in the distance. Not police cars. Coast Guard cutters. and a black helicopter with the FBI logo on the side. The architect had come through. Rachel looked at the velvet bag, still clipped to Logan's belt loop. The $1 billion was safe. The ledger was exposed. But as she looked at her son, wet, shivering, but alive, she knew the real treasure wasn't in the bag. 6 months later, the sun set over the Pacific Ocean, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. On the balcony of a small, white villa in Rarotonga, a tiny island in the Cook Islands, Rachel Stone sat with a cup of tea. Her shoulder still ached when it rained, but the scar had faded to a thin white line. Logan was on the floor of the living room. He was surrounded by wires, servos, and plastic parts. "Almost done," he muttered, tongue poking out in concentration. "Dinner in 5. Genius," Rachel called out. "Mom, look." Rachel walked inside. On the table stood a new robot. It wasn't red and clunky like the old one. It was sleek, blue, made of modern polymers. Logan flipped a switch. The robot's eyes lit up. "System. Online. Hello, Logan." It wasn't Mark's voice. It was Logan's recorded voice. Synthesized. "It works." Logan beamed. "And look." He pressed a button. The robot's chest opened. Inside, there was no secret code. No money. Just a small, framed photo. It was the three of them, Mark, Rachel, and baby Logan, taken years ago at a park. "A secure vault," Logan said proudly, "for the important stuff." Rachel felt a lump in her throat. She knelt down and kissed the top of his head. "It's perfect, Lo." She looked out at the ocean. The ledger was dismantled. The names on the drive had led to over 500 arrests worldwide. The money? Rachel had anonymously donated 90% of it to veteran charities and orphanages. She kept just enough to disappear. Just enough to be free. She wasn't Sergeant Stone anymore. She wasn't a fugitive. She was just Mom. And for the first time in a long time, the silence didn't mean danger. It meant peace.